all of your toys layer masked and looking the way you want them to based upon the selection areas. The next thing we need to look at, and you can see over here inside of my layers panel, the ability to go in and adjust what we have for our look. So we're going to go ahead and work with this rabbit here. So we start to see what we have set for the object. If we look at the color of it, we see that the color is actually off on this. So one way we can go in as we're dealing with a composite is to adjust that to make that look as close to the background as possible, knowing that we shot these in the same environment. So we're going to do that. We're going to disable the layer mask. Once we disable the layer mask, we now see the overlay occurring on there. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add ourselves a curves adjustment. So when we go in and we add the curves, we start working to get this to look close to what we have in the background. And then the second thing is to come in here and add hue and saturation. And then once we add the hue and saturation, we can go ahead and play with those sliders to adjust them so that we get that image that's on top, so in this case the rabbit image, to match up closely with what is in its background. It's not going to be perfect, it's not going to match up identically, but this is the advantage of shooting with the camera, shooting in an environment, and allowing us to go in and compile it. So once we have that set and we're happy with what's there, we move our values around. We then can go back in and re-enable our layer masks. Now the nice thing about creating this is you'll see that we have gone in and we've clipped them to the layer below them, so therefore our curves and our hue and saturation only impact the layer directly below it, which becomes our rabbit layer. Remember, you can do that by holding down Option and simply clicking between the rabbit layer and that curves layer, and the same thing for our hue and saturation 1. And then once you have that set, we are able to come in here. We can move this around. Notice that as we move it, it's going to maintain those same adjustment layers, because adjustment layers, as we see in the layer mask from that, applies all the way across what exists inside of this layer. So we can move that around and work in a way that's non-destructive and allow us to make adjustments to that. So what you want to do is you will want to go ahead and place those on each one of the toy layers, adjusting them, working towards its background. If we look at what's going on with the ukulele, you can see here, gone in and I've adjusted that so it begins to match up with what is there. Adjust our color. So what happens here is we're adjusting our color balance based with hue and saturation to allow us to make them match up with our environment. Again, they're not going to be perfect, but this does allow us to work with them. So once we have those set, we've gone through and we've adjusted each one. You can see I've worked through on the various different layers to work with. The only other things that I've added into here is on my super person, so the toddler one, after I went in and masked it off, I went ahead and created just a little shadow. You can see there coming off of him. So we're extending out that little bit of shadow that was there so that it doesn't just stop. So we have everything set, we have everything masked, we have everything looking the way that we want this to look. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to go in here to the effects. Now this effects one here, remember we're dealing with stacking order. This is the uppermost layer that is on here. With this layer, we went in to start adding some adjustments to this. Now what we have here is we have a curves adjustment. We added this curves adjustment to allow us to lighten and to darken. So you'll see there's two of them on here. So when we went in here to darken, we first add this over, and we used our layer mask to go in and knock out some areas that we didn't want to be darker because they are already dark. So we can hit the feet just a little bit, possibly a little bit on the reader's sweatshirt. The cat itself, we don't want to make it too dark or it's just going to be a solid black. We want those tones to be in there. And then we also want to go in then and work to lighten up the area. So as we went through, we lightened it up. We created our own little bit of a vignette going around the edges. And if you wanted to, you could always come in here and we could continue to darken up some areas. So if we wanted to put some around the edges, I could go ahead and grab a hold of my brush and we could paint in here to allow us to darken up what's going around on our edges. And we can also go in, you see the hardness is down at nothing, so we can increase this to give a little bit of that vignette. Now this is occurring across the whole image. We knocked some down here on the lower portion as well to put a little bit more focus on the super person, our super toddler that is here. And then the last thing, as we go through to control even the feeling, the temperature of it, we went ahead and popped in here another layer. This layer, then we can play around with what blend mode we want with this. Typically when we go into work with this, we're going to come in here on an overlay, and then we can adjust our opacity. You can make it as warm, or we can cool it down, and then based upon what we choose for the color to fill that with, and all it is a simple layer that we go in and we filled that layer, and then play with the opacity to control, like I said, the temperature that we have with the light inside of the environment. As you put that together, you may notice just some other little things. Like I said, I did add in a shadow down here for the toddler. And one other thing, when I went through and created my mask for my picture frame, I did actually go in and paint in a shadow for the picture frame. So if we look at it here on the toys, there's a picture on the wall. I went ahead and painted a little bit of a shadow behind that so that it looked more natural based upon the light that's coming into there. So as you go and you start to build your super composite, think about how you're going to make each item work with its environment. Start to think about different tricks you can add to your toolbox to allow these things to look more natural in their environment. And however you end up making it look, hopefully it worked out good for you. This here, super composite.